What's up guys, Drew here with the Loam Wolf, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Marin Wolfridge Pro. The Wolfridge Pro is a test bike we've been riding for the better part of a year now. The Wolfridge Pro is the top of the line Wolfridge offered by Marin. It is a 160 millimeter travel 29er, and it is billed as a do-it-all, efficient, burly, all mountain bike that you can take out and kind of do everything you want to do with. We've had the bike, as we said, for about a year now, and have tested it in just about every type of terrain and location we've come across on the West Coast, and it's definitely been one of our favorite test bikes for the whole crew in recent memory. It lives up to a lot of the bold claims that it makes. It is not a perfect bike, but it is amazing, and it does a lot of stuff exceptionally well. And yeah, let's dig into it, and we'll tell you what we liked and what we'd like to see improved, and talk a little bit about the suspension design and where it comes from. First off, the Marin Wolfridge Pro is built around the React two-play system, which was designed by Darryl Voss and his company Nailed. The heart of this system is the sliding stanchion and the link that runs parallel to the chain and drivetrain to the rear axle. Essentially what that link does with the sliding stanchion is help isolate drivetrain and pedaling forces from impact forces coming from underneath the tire. And we can say that it absolutely does what it claims there. We've not ridden a bike that handles terrain under load while we're pedaling and climbing up features like this bike does. It absolutely remains effortless in the way that the wheel gets out of obstacles path and maintains forward momentum while you're pushing power down to the pedals. So that comes in great part to the undamped rear shock. One of the main things that Darryl worked on was having an open enough shock tune that allows the rear wheel to get out of the way and doesn't rely on hydraulic damping inside the shock or air pressure as much as it does just the kinematics of the suspension design to move effortlessly away from obstacles while still giving you enough ramp towards the end of the stroke on big hits. The best way I can sort of describe it is while you're pedaling or climbing the bike, it feels like two completely different bikes, I guess, at the seat, you know, at your ass and where you're pedaling. While you're sitting down, it feels like you're on an undersprung, you know, downhill bike or a 180 bike that's just super soft, plush, and it just feels like it's going to be terribly inefficient because of how well it tracks over every little obstacle in the ground. Conversely, while you're pedaling, the efficiency is very impressive. Power is very direct to the rear wheel, and especially if you're riding with clipless pedals, you can really sort of get what Darryl calls getting the bike on plane. If you imagine a boat, as it accelerates, you know, it's dragging, and then once it gets to the right speed, it planes out. And this bike has that sensation. The downside to that is you can sit down and pedal in areas that you normally would not pedal other bikes. So we were hitting our crank arms, the bottoms of the crank arms, and our pedals quite often on the Wolfridge Pro, which comes spec'd with 175 crank arms, and we definitely feel, because of the ability to climb this bike so well, it needs to have shorter crank arms to really maximize that performance, because you're no longer standing up through rock gardens or root sections where you're having to time your pedal strokes or unweight the bike to move up. You can just sit down and motor up sections, and that became an issue because of the pedal clearance with the low bottom bracket height. And again, it's hard to complain because it's a good and a bad at the same time. So next up, descending, the rear wheel remains equally active, sensitive, and the tracking ability is phenomenal. If you just get on the bike and ride it, you'll find that it actually does a really good job just being as it is, left alone, which was another big part of this design, was to sort of demystify and de-tech shock tuning and the need for, you know, overly complicated shocks to fix or improve less than stellar suspension designs. You know, this bike in all reality has got an amazing suspension design that does a lot of stuff well and doesn't need an expensive, overly complicated shock or tune, or a rider with the ability to make those tunes to help it ride well. The downside is when we rode trails that were, you know, manufactured or flow type trails with lots of fast, high-speed short lips that were, you know, kind of steep and bucky. If we were a little tired and weren't really on top of that preload into the lip and jumping right, it would come close to bucking us forward a little bit. So we would have liked to have maybe been able to control the rebound, maybe 2 more clicks slower for those types of trails. However, for the vast majority of our riding over raw, natural terrain, having that fast and effortless movement through the shock has resulted in one of the most, I guess, impressive feeling test bikes that we've been on. Traction was stellar. Cornering ability, you know, everybody raved about just because of how well the tire stayed planted on the ground. We could brake late, corner hard, and it stayed on the ground, and it offered a lot of confidence to riders of varying levels, not just experts, but, you know, intermediate to beginner level riders also felt a big improvement in their confidence, just because it really toned down anything on the trail that you would encounter. Rear end stiffness. We've seen other videos and reviewers complain about the lack of stiffness from the rear end. Yes, it is not the stiffest rear end by far. It's a bit flexy. To the point that it's a drawback, I don't know. Again, I just talked about how much everyone loved cornering this bike and the traction, and I believe that the amount of flex that came out of the rear end is partially contributing to the amount of traction, because if you've got something, it's much like the Fox 40 versus the Manitou Dorado. You know, if you ever rode an older Fox 40 that were extremely stiff versus a Dorado on wet off-camber routes, and you'd hit that 40, the front tire would just instantly deflect because it was so stiff, whereas the Dorado could twist and move and allow the tire to continue straight. And it's much the same effect with this Marin. Again, if you're a bike park kind of guy and you like jumps and berms, this probably isn't the best bike for you anyways, just because that rear end is so plush and soft that the bike is playful, but it's not going to be your stiff, poppy, kind of jumpy bike that you know, a lot of the bike parky guys like to have. If you're just a mountain biker who likes to ride all sorts of terrain, you want to have a bike that's comfortable and going to climb up to the top, not beat your ass up, and stay supple and efficient, and then turn around and boost your confidence and, you know, eat up the terrain beneath you. The Wolf Ridge is a really amazing bike for that. We would have liked maybe a ½ degree slacker head angle. Other issues were the front of the down, or I should say the bottom of the down tube just in front of the cranks protrudes a little bit in front of, I guess, the bash guard. If you know, you mistime something over a big downed tree, stump, or, you know, large rock, we did contact that a couple of times. Luckily, there's a very big bash guard up there which protects the frame quite nicely, but you know, that's just one of the drawbacks of how that stanchion comes down and mounts into the frame. That down tube comes forward just a little bit. It's hard for us to tell you it climbs like this and descends like this, because it really doesn't. It rides different to anything else that we've been on. If you're thinking about getting the bike, I guess what I would recommend is asking you you know, what type of terrain you ride, what style of a rider are you, and what do you want out of a bike. If you're a bike parky guy who loves, you know, banked hard berms, jumps, and jibbing off little stuff, you know, it may not be your dream bike. If you're an, you know, expert level downhill or enduro guy and you want a bike that's going to give you insane traction, bump eating ability, and be an efficient and extremely smooth climber, down to you know, an intermediate to beginner level rider who's just looking for a bit of an advantage, something that will give them more traction, more confidence, more control, and that will also you know, just improve what they can ride on, because it makes the terrain so much easier to navigate because of how well that rear end works. The Wolf Ridge is a pretty incredible bike, and one that we can easily recommend to those types of riders. Feel free to reach out, ask any questions below. We'll do our best to reply. Check out our full review at theloamwolf.com. And yeah, hope you enjoyed, and see you on the trails.